5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much your generous invitation to be here tonight. You bear heavy responsibilities these days.
Welcome to Stock Legends Radio Show, seeking answers, opinions, and the inside scoop, putting you in the front seat on Wall Street.
In today's market,
This is breaking news. Where is it going next?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Stock Legends Radio Show. Please welcome today's host, myself, Quick Draw. Also today we have the CEO of a NASDAQ company that we're extremely excited to have on the show today. He represents an exciting company doing a lot to help keep officers and schools and places safe. His name is Ron Wessner, and he is the CEO of COPsync Incorporated, traded under the NASDAQ under ticker symbol COYN. And they also have a warrant stock under ticker symbol COYNW. Ron, welcome to the Stock Legends Radio Show.
Justin, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, the pleasure's all ours, Ron. Now, Ron, for the listeners that may not be familiar with yourself and the company, why don't you take a brief second and tell us a little bit about your past and what brought you to where you are today with your company?
Justin, thank you very much for introducing me. COPsync is the third publicly held startup and emerging company that I have been a senior executive at. I'm the CEO here of COPsync, and the first company that I was a senior executive at was a NASDAQ company by the name of Amtech Corporation, NASDAQ AMTC, and we were in the radio frequency identification business, and one of our key product offerings was electronic toll collection. So, for example, the electronic toll collection systems that are being used in Texas, Oklahoma, California, Florida, and in the system being used in Manhattan there was a systems that we developed or installed. In addition, we also put radio frequency identification technologies on every railroad car in North America and also throughout the world, so that today on every continent of the world that has people, the Amtech radio frequency technology is being used. Following that, we created a business known by the name of Zix Corporation, NASDAQ ZIXI, software as a service, providing encrypted email for HIPAA and GLIBA, the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act compliance. And HIPAA and HIPAA compliance, of course, is focused in the medical arena, and GLIBA was focused for financial institutions. The concept was to provide encrypted email so that private health information and private banking and financial information could be sent securely through the internet. Following that, I left that company, which of course today is doing very, very well, and have been the CEO of COPsync since 2010.
That's quite a substantial track record, Ron. It's very reassuring for investors that you have so much experience within the market. Now, Ron, if you don't mind, let's switch gears and talk specifically about COPsync and what exactly the company does for the listeners that are listening today.
Yes, Justin, I would be happy to do that. Your listeners will be horrified to learn that in America today, law enforcement agencies have zero ability to communicate from one law enforcement agency to the next. And so, for example, if there is a crime in progress, such as a bank robbery, child kidnapping, police pursuit, and the offender leaves the city or county where it originated and moves into a new city or county, at that point, there are zero law enforcement officers looking for that kidnapped child, the stolen vehicle, the bank robber, because law enforcement agencies have zero ability to communicate these crimes in progress from one agency to the next. Furthermore, law enforcement agencies have zero ability to communicate information known to one agency to their brother and sister agencies. For example, a person could be known to be a threat to law enforcement. This person could be known as someone that has threatened to kill a police officer. A person could be known to be a suspected child pedophile. A person could be known to be involved or suspected to be involved in terrorist activity, And this information, while known to one law enforcement agency, is known to 0 other law enforcement agencies in America because law enforcement agencies do not share a common information database of this type of information. We at COPsync are solving that problem by creating a national network, a national communication system that enables law enforcement officers and agencies to communicate crimes in progress from one agency to the next, and also to share this mission-critical actionable information so that if a person is known to be a cop killer, if they're known to be or suspected to be a child pedophile, if they're known or suspected to be involved in drug smuggling, weapons smuggling, human trafficking, or terrorist activity, then that information known to one law enforcement agency is then known and made known to all other law enforcement agencies and officers that are using the COPsync system, which we refer to as the COPsync Communication Network.
You know, how many lives exactly do you think, I know it's hard to put a number on it, do you think this type of technology saves? Because you have to think, if a criminal moves into a different county or a different precinct and is armed and dangerous, an unsuspecting officer may pull that person over, for running a red light and not know that they had robbed a bank in another county. How mission critical is this type of interconnectivity going forward into the future with all of the violence that we're witnessing daily in the news?
Well, this information is exceedingly critical. For example, according to the Department of Justice, a law enforcement officer is killed in the line of duty once every 60 hours here in America. So think about that. Every 60 hours in America, a law enforcement officer is killed in the line of duty. Now, some of these are shootings with perpetrators. Some of these involve accidents or other circumstances. But the point of the matter is that law enforcing is a dangerous profession, and we need to arm our law enforcement officers with 21st century technologies to enable them to do their jobs more effectively. So, for example, remember how can we forget? We all remember the Orlando shooting that occurred recently. In this particular case, the individuals that was responsible for that shooting was someone that the FBI had been investigating, but yet that information was not known to any of the local law enforcement officers there in the Orlando area or any other law enforcement officer in America for that purpose. And so hence, this person would have been someone that could have been the subject of a routine traffic stop by officers there in the local area, and they would not have known that this individual was a dangerous individual. Furthermore, we all remember the Boston Marathon bombing a couple years ago. In that particular case, the individuals that were responsible for that bombing were people that the FBI suspected to be involved in terrorist activity and was in fact actively watching them. Yet that information was not known to the Boston Police Department. And Boston Commissioner at the time, Ed Davis, when he found out about it after the fact, was very unhappy and upset about it, made public comments to the effect that the FBI knew this information, it wasn't known to the local police, and that put his officers at risk because any one of his officers could have made a so-called routine traffic stop on these individuals and could have ended up being killed or injured because they were not aware of the profile of the people that they were stopping.
How many police departments across the United States are currently using the COPsync technology, and what kind of increase in new branches of police departments coming on board have you seen?
We have 725 law enforcement agencies and courts in 12 states across the U.S. on the COPsync system right now. Of those, 530 are here in Texas, which is our home state, and the rest reside in 11 other states across the U.S.
We also see here that it's not just police departments that COPsync focuses on, which is very critical because we see in the news every day these school shootings, crazy type of situations that occur. If they had the ability to put out a signal, for example, a lot of schools are putting security guards or officers on staff at the school. If there was a situation, they were able to go ahead and put an alert out because this technology, correct me if I'm wrong, also comes in the form of an app that can be put on an officer's phone or a security person's phone to be able to give them the ability to alert a situation in progress from anywhere. How much faster do you think the response time is by having this capability in a portable device, which is ingenious?
That's a very good point. It's critical that officers arrive on scene in these mass shooting circumstances, or even a routine situation that you might have in a school, for example. You might have a gun on campus, knife on campus, gang fight, irate parent at the school, any of these type of circumstances. It's important to save minutes when seconds count. So the way that we address this problem is we have a service we call COPsync 911. We sell it to schools, courthouses, government buildings, any other facility that has more than an average level of concern about its security. And what we do is we connect the people under threat directly to the closest patrol officers and foot patrol in their car or via their mobile device and the local dispatch center, so that people under threat, they push the app on their cell phone, or they're in the computer in the classroom, for example. The app connects them directly to the dispatcher and to the local patrol officers that we find via GPS. Once they're connected, they are able to communicate situational information to the responding officers and dispatch via a quote crisis communications portal that my marketing people tell me to call it, but what the rest of us would refer to as a chat room. We provide the officers an online map so they know how to vector and get to the school as quickly as possible, and a facility diagram so that when someone says the shooter, the gang fight, the knife, the medical emergency, the irate parent, whatever the circumstance is that is occurring in the library, then the responding officers can look at the online facility diagram. They can see the library is around the back of the building, for example, and there's a door down the hall, and they'll drive around to the back. Whereas where do they go today? Of course, they drive to the front door and they ask someone, where's the library? What we're doing here is we're saving minutes in those circumstances when seconds count. And so I'm going to talk to you about the importance of saving time. In the Columbine shooting that occurred in 1999, in the space of 8.5 minutes, which is about the time we've been speaking, 8 people were killed and 12 were wounded, all in the space of 8.5 minutes. And so seconds matter. And what we do with this service is we're saving seconds and minutes. And we call this system COPsync 911. We have 1,000 facilities across the U.S. using the COPsync 911 system, sprinkled among 10 different states. And this system is unique because we're the only service in America, to my knowledge, that is finding the closest patrol officers and foot patrol and sending the alerts directly to them, all for the purpose of enabling them to getting on scene much quicker.
Which makes a difference between life and death, literally. Also, another couple of unique aspects of this is that it also gives them the ability to pull up a diagram of the building under threat. So there's a lot of information being stored in this database, where in the past, if a school were under threat and they say, hey, this is happening in the library, well, who knows where the library is? So having the ability to be able to dig in and pull up the floor plan, be able to know where the other officers are on scene, communicate interconnectively, I mean, that's a huge tactical advantage.
No question about it. It is a huge tactical advantage. And what we're doing is we're arming law enforcement officers and facilities under threat with 21st century digital technologies. If you look at the primary communication means today among law enforcement agencies and facilities under threat, what are they using? They're using the phone system or radio. Those of us that remember our history recall that the phones and radios were invented in the 1800s. So our law enforcement agencies and facilities under threat mainly today are communicating with 1800s technology. And what we're doing with COPsync is we are implementing and providing 21st century digital technologies, digital communications means to enable law enforcement officers and agencies to communicate between and among themselves as if they were one law enforcement agency, and enabling facilities under threat, schools, courthouses, government buildings, other facilities under threat to communicate directly with the patrol officers, all for the purpose of saving minutes in those circumstances when seconds count.
it's very mission critical, and it has to feel good as well because, your company and your technology is really making a difference in saving lives. So there's an aspect of feeling good that you're making a difference with this kind of technology. Let's switch gears and talk specifically about some of the achievements that the company has seen over the past year. I know you've seen rapid expansion as far as the law enforcement agencies coming on board. Do you want to talk about, let's just say, the last 12 months and some of the exciting expansion the company has seen?
Yes, I would like to do that. 2015 was a year of enormous achievement for the company. The company uplisted from over-the-counter to the NASDAQ system and began trading under the trading symbol COYN plus the tradable warrant COYNW. In connection with that uplist, the company also raised gross $10.6 million. And we're very, very proud of that because it gives us a platform and the capital now to put very firmly in place and execute our national expansion plans. This year, we've seen significant in milestones in the growth of the business. For example, in our home state of Texas, where we started and created this business, there are 20% of the law enforcement agencies in the great state of Texas are now using the COPsync information sharing and communication network. Point number one. Point number two, we have 50%, one half of the 254 sheriff's offices in the state of Texas are now using the COPsync information sharing and communication system, the COPsync network. We have one customer in 80% of the 254 counties in Texas, and all but one of the 14 border sheriffs on the U.S.-Mexico border here in Texas are using the COPsync system. So the company has achieved a very, very significant penetration here in the state of Texas. In addition, we have expanded into 11 other states, and so that in these 11 other states, we plan to replicate the growth that we have seen here in Texas. And then we're going to use this success as the springboard then for ultimately spreading this communication system network and the COPsync 911 alerting system to all 50 states of the U.S.
That's a very exciting time in a large market. There's a lot of states, there's a lot of different police departments out there. You have to kind of scratch your head when you think of where the world is going and the amount of chaos that we're seeing every day on the news and how a lot of these departments are able to function on a daily basis without having that stream of confident information. How could this technology also be used in crisis type of situations? For example, Hurricane Katrina, I'm sure you remember, there was such a breakdown in communication. There were so many boots on the ground, but the communication was so poor that it really kind of just turned into the aftermath was just complete chaos. If there was another crisis like Hurricane Katrina and they had this interconnectivity, how do you think that would have affected the amount of time that it took the agencies on the ground to be able to adapt and overcome the situation that they were witnessing? It
would have made an enormous difference. The ability to communicate is of paramount importance in these circumstances. So, for example, let me give an example of how the COPsync communication system was able to operate in the situation where there was no other form of communication, including telephone or radio. There is a city in Texas by the name of West, W-E-S-T, Texas. A few years ago, they had a chemical explosion that killed a number of individuals and took down the entirety of the communication system there, other than the COPsync network, because the COPsync network resides or runs, carried on that portion of the cellular network that operates at the frequency or operates at the band where it was not taken out by this explosion. So, for example, when you have these explosions, the first piece of the communication that goes is the voice. But nevertheless, there's still the ability for data to be carried on the cellular network. And in this particular case, the data communication provided by the COPsync system enabled the first responders who were COPsync network users to communicate between and among themselves, whereas all the other responders that were using radios, for example, were not able to have any communication ability. So the point is that these digital communication means, these 21st century means of communicating, are inherently, through the internet, Wi-Fi, cellular network, are inherently more robust than a radio communication for the obvious reason. So, for example, we all have messaging applications that we can use from our cell phone where we literally can message and talk in a virtual way to any other people across the world. This is very, very powerful, and what we're talking about is using these types of digital communication means to enable law enforcement agencies now and officers to communicate between and among themselves and to communicate with people under threat at schools, courthouses, government buildings, and so forth.
It's life-saving technology. In a world filled with chaos, we watch the market and how the market reacts to these violent and horrible, tragic situations that are occurring almost on a daily basis. It's nice to see a company that actually has some skin in the game that's going in there and trying to curb the violence that we're seeing. It's a great mission that you have, and you're really making a difference. Hopefully this technology will continue to grow and adapt, and maybe we'll have one day where we're able to get these tragic type of situations under control, or at least get the responses that are required to save lives. If we look at Orlando and we look at a lot of these different occurrences, you had mentioned Columbine earlier, these situations occurred for long periods of time. There's 30, 40 dead. I mean, this is a huge loss that communities are feeling, where the ability to communicate split-second decisions under fire and under duress literally could have saved 10 people or 10 children, or could have been your son or your daughter or your husband or your wife. So how important is this technology to the future? And it also kind of gives you an idea of how the future will pave the way for the company. There's many different technologies in the world that may not have a bright future, but the way the world's going, it would be hard to believe that COPsync is not in the perfect path to be able to not only make a difference, but be able to grow exponentially with the type of crime that we're seeing nowadays.
Well, absolutely, Justin. There's no question about that. And I want to give your listeners 2 or 3 examples of the power of this ability to communicate crimes in progress and share this type of mission-critical actionable information between and among law enforcement officers and agencies. So let me give you one example to start with that involved the drug interdiction. We had an officer using our system in East Texas that made a traffic stop on a vehicle, had consent to search the vehicle, found a couple 100 pounds of illegal narcotics in the car. Okay, nothing unusual has happened thus far. The driver of the vehicle told the officer that the driver, or that his vehicle was traveling in tandem with another vehicle that was the decoy vehicle. So the officer then went into the COPsync system and created what we call a BOLO, be on the lookout for vehicle X, and he had the license plate of the vehicle to be on the lookout for. He put that information in the COPsync database. It sat there quietly until 10 days later, another patrol officer hundreds of miles away across the state was running license plates. Boom, up pops this BOLO, this vehicle suspected to be involved in the narcotics trafficking. The officer follows the vehicle, observes the traffic violation, makes a traffic stop, gets consent to search the vehicle, and found $200-some thousand worth of cash in the gas tank, which, but for having been told to be, having been alerted to this vehicle, never would have found that money. It would have been in El Chapo's bank account by now. That's one example of the ability or the power of sharing this non-adjudicated law enforcement information from one law enforcement officer and agency to the next. Another example would involve a crime in progress. We had a circumstance where there was a child kidnapped. The distraught mom had the color and type of the vehicle, white. A pickup truck, we'll say, had 3 characters, the license plate X-Ray King. That's all she knew about it. Called the distraught mom, calls this information into the dispatch center. The dispatcher, who was on the COPsync network, then opens the application, creates what we call a broadcast message and she also created a geographical object on the map and said, okay, I want to send this broadcast message to all the law enforcement officers within this scope of this object I'm creating. And so she just circled an object there surrounding the city where the call came in, typed out this information. white truck, Ford white pickup truck, X-Ray King license plate, 2-year-old blonde female kidnapped, hit send, and within minutes, seconds, every law enforcement officer that was on the COPsync system received that message in their patrol cars or on foot patrol and were looking. And 60 miles away, 45 minutes later, a patrol officer that had received the alert was sitting in there on the interstate. Here comes a white truck traveling at high speed, pulls behind the vehicle. Yep, X-Ray King, those are the license plate characters, made the traffic stop and recovered the kid. But for this, having this powerful information communication ability, that child would have been dead, because there would have been no law enforcement officers looking for the vehicle, because none would have known about it, because law enforcement officers without the COPsync network have zero ability to communicate these crimes in progress across jurisdictional boundaries.
That's very interesting. You had mentioned the drug situation. Had that officer not stopped that potential suspect, we'd be looking at 20 pounds of deadly narcotics going to local neighborhoods and kids. And it's so important and mission critical that you have such a footprint in Texas, because that's a bordering state to Mexico. And a lot of those towns and counties in that area, we watch on TV every day, are really on the front lines until a significant wall and a system is put together to prevent the drugs coming into the country. You're really the last line of defense between deadly narcotics and our children, which is scary.
You raise a very, very good point. So let's talk about that for a minute. There's a war going down on in the border. There's no question about it. And Texas, 2/3 of the U.S.-Mexico border is here in the great state of Texas. And use your common sense, and it tells you that 2/3 of all the narcotics, the gun smuggling, the human trafficking, the money laundering, et cetera, is traveling through Texas, either to or from Mexico. Now, we know that the drugs, the weapons, the human trafficking, we know that it doesn't stay in Texas. It permeates and spreads throughout the entirety of the U.S. Now, further to this point, remember a few months ago when El Chapo, the Mexican gang lord, was arrested? Well, at the time he was arrested, it turned out that he was the most wanted person in 10 states across the U.S. So 10 states of the 50, 20% of the states in America had put him as their number one most wanted person. And so this gives you some idea of the breadth of these criminal enterprises, how the breadth with which they have spread throughout the U.S. And my point is that 2/3 of all of this nefarious behavior is coming into the United States through Texas. And so hence the information that Texas law enforcement officers are creating and putting into the system in terms of the vehicles they're making traffic stops on, the vehicles are making they're writing citations to, the individuals that they encounter where they have some suspicion that they're involved in illegal activity. All of this information now goes into the COPsync database of non-adjudicated law enforcement agency and is available to any other law enforcement officer in America on the COPsync system that encounters that same individual. So, for example, if you're a patrol officer in New Hampshire or Massachusetts, where we have a good footprint of law enforcement officers and agencies, and you make a traffic stop on a vehicle, and you discover that it was a subject of a traffic stop 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months ago in Texas or one of the other states between Texas and New England where they happen to have traveled, then as a patrol officer, that's information that is valuable information to you and may make the difference between you handing a citation to someone saying, "Have a nice day," and asking further questions of the driver of the vehicle, and then subsequently searching the vehicle and finding guns, money, people being smuggled, so and so forth. It's very, very powerful information. You talk to any law enforcement officer in America, and they will tell you that having access to this non-adjudicated information is information that they desperately need and want, and will help them be more effective in interdicting crime and criminal behavior. No question about it.
Yeah, it's huge. It's definitely a game changer. It's very exciting technology. Now, Ron, for the listeners that are listening today that have learned a lot about your company, that may be interested in investing in the company, perhaps you want to welcome them on board, or maybe give them a foresight of the company's goals over the next year?
Yes, we would love to have them on board. And let me talk to you about the company's near-term and medium-term goals. Our near-term goal is to become cash flow positive in 2017. And the foundation of the business is software as a service, which means recurring revenue from our customers. And so the object of the business is to sign as many customers as we can, either on the law enforcement information sharing network or the COPsync 911 network for schools, government buildings, courthouses, and so forth, where we have each one of them paying an annually recurring subscription fee. And so what we're doing here is we are running the business on a foundation of annually recurring subscription fees, and we're adding to that base of customers every day, every week, every month, every year. And hence, as that subscription base keeps on growing, we have the renewing subscriptions that move into each new year, and then we're piling on top of that the new subscribers that we're adding. And hence, at some point, all of this, of course, is going to create a circumstance where we reach a position of being cash flow positive. And because we're able to support all of this business on a relatively fixed expense structure, which in this case is we're using the technology platform of the Microsoft Azure Cloud, because we're able to support all of these customers on a relatively fixed expense structure, then once we go cash flow positive, the cash will continue to accrete from now until the end of time. And the discounted cash flow of having nearly 1 million law enforcement officers on the system and having our fair percentage of the hundreds of thousands of public schools, courthouses, government buildings, and so forth, all of them paying this an annually recurring fee, we see that the value of this business is going to be very, very attractive someday, particularly with the understanding that we are the only company in America that is connecting law enforcement officers on this common information sharing communication platform. So the prognosis for the business is exceedingly positive. Folks that look at software as a service businesses, they all understand that they go through a period of being cash flow negative. But yet once they go cash flow positive, then they never go back, because you have the power of the recurring revenue and the recurring cash continuing to drive the business year after year after year.
That makes a lot of sense. So it has a great stickiness factor. A lot of companies go after a client and convert a client, and it's a one-time revenue. So the fact that there's a recurring revenue here makes the future look extremely optimistic. Now, for the investors listening today, we can bring them over to the website, which is COPsync.com. COPsync.com. There's some great information there for investors to view. There's also some videos, and there's also a YouTube channel and a Vimeo channel for the company, which you can search under COPsync. Ron, anything else that you would like to say to the investors listening today?
Yes, I would. I want to talk about the national security implications of the COPsync information sharing network and communication network that we're building. Let me use hypothetical examples, but yet we all know in our heart of hearts that for sure this has occurred somewhere in America today. Let's assume that we have a police officer in, we'll say, Houston, Texas, that encounters an individual taking photographs of the power generating facility there in the Houston area. The officer is going to approach the individual, going to ask them what they're doing. They're going to tell the officer that they're an amateur photographer, just simply taking pictures with a higher powered lens of the energy infrastructure. The officer will tell them that this is private property, and unless you leave, you'll be issued a criminal trespass citation. The individual will, of course, leave, and at that point, the information from that routine encounter will go in one of two places for the officer. Number one, the officer may make a notation of it in that little flip notebook that officers carry around their breast pocket, just make a little notation of it and put it back there in their pocket. Or the officer may go back to his law enforcement agency and put that information in their little records management system there, the silo of information, and it goes nowhere. Weeks later, a patrol officer, let's say in Dallas, Texas, encounters an individual taking high-power photographs of the energy transmission facilities in the Dallas area that power the power grid for the entirety of the state of Texas. The officer will have the same conversation with the individual as the patrol officer did in Houston. That information will go into the officer's breast pocket, little notebook they keep, and perhaps into the records management system that the Dallas area officer for his agency, and that information goes nowhere. Now, it turns out this individual is the same person, yet the subsequent officer had no idea that this individual had been found taking these photographs days, weeks, months earlier somewhere else. And had the subsequent officer known, of course, they would have handled the encounter very, very differently. Now, we all know that this type of circumstances happened here in America. What we don't know is where it occurred. And so what I'm saying is that linking or connecting law enforcement officers to this common database of non-adjudicated law enforcement information is not only critical for local public safety, keeping the school children safe, keeping law enforcement safe, keeping the ordinary citizen safe, it is also critically important for national security. And someday we're going to have created this nationwide network that will enable the sharing of this type of information and thereby enable the U.S. to be more effective at combating terrorist and terroristic activities.
I can't agree with you more. There's more and more of a need for this. Unfortunately, the world seems to be more and more a target of violence as a means to portray a message. So the future worth of this kind of technology is extremely significant. There's absolutely no doubt about that in anybody's mind that COPsync technology will play a meaningful role in the future, pretty much from here on out. It's very exciting, everything going on with the company. You've led the company in a very strategic and successful fashion. It's very difficult for companies to move from the over-counter to the NASDAQ and be as successful as you have been as a leader of this company. I've always been a strong believer in betting on the jockey and not the horse. And based on your past and your performance as the CEO of this company, it's a very exciting time. This is a very exciting stock to watch. There's a lot of room for expansion. And we want all of the listeners today that are listening to go and take a look at the company. Go and visit COPsync.com. There's a lot of information there. Take a look at the stock. Take a look at the technicals. Right now, the chart is having a reset. It looks like a bullish swing could be coming in the near future. It's trading under ticker symbol COYN on the NASDAQ. Also, take a look at the warrant version of the stock, COYNW. Ron, it's been our pleasure having you on the Stock Legends radio show today.
Justin, it's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners. God bless, and let's go work on building this business and creating a business that is good for America and will be good for the investors.
We're right behind you, Ron.